So in my last video, I went over how to start teaching the nose target indication for scent work. Now, for dogs that struggle with that, and some do, a retrieve can be a good alternative. Now, what I will say about retrieve is if you want to go into some form of scent work, competitive scent work with your dog, be mindful of what their rules are, because some don't encourage what's called an active indication, which retrieves are classified under that. So when it comes to teaching a retrieve, it's just like any other retrieve technique, really. What you need to do is get your dog to have the item in its mouth. Now, not all dogs want to do this. My girl is a perfect example of a dog that wasn't a fan. She now can't be stopped, so she's not going to show you how it's taught. I'm going to have to show you myself. But what I would say is try doing it on all sorts of items. Don't just stick to whatever it is you're going to eventually scent. Now, the upside of doing a retrieve is if you just want to do scent work for fun in the park, etc. So when you do get to a point where you hide items in more kind of natural environments, your dog can bring it back to you rather than you having to go and get it out yourself, when you might not know where you've left it. So that can be a benefit to a retrieve. It's also very good for dogs that naturally want to mouth things. So I taught Meg how to do this because I'm physically limited, and it helps if I don't have to go back and pick things up. So I created some of these myself. This is fleece fabric and it's kind of knotted. There's instructions on the internet on how to make these. I think they're called squirrels. But if you don't want to use this, you could just use a scrap of fabric. You could also use a retrieve toy. There's specific items for that. Or you could try a pencil. This is a mechanical one. Whatever you're going to use, if you do use a pencil and your dog is a chewer, don't use a wooden one or a plastic one if your dog's going to disintegrate it. So just be mindful about what you choose to use. So the item isn't scented, we just want the dog to hold it. So I'm going to swap for a second and go back to the bottle that I use for the nose target. They've never mouthed this, so please excuse me while I pretend to be a dog. So for a dog that doesn't want to pick something up, you take the smallest behavior that will lead you on the path to them holding it. So it could be, to start with, that it's just a look. And if that's all your dog will do, take it. And by take it, I mean you mark it. So you use your word, or if you're using a clicker, you click. And every time they look, they get that marker, they get that click. So yes, yes. Then once we've got that, we wait for a next step in the increment of that behaviour. So it could be that it's a touch with the mouth. You know, a stare isn't getting me anything anymore, so I'm going to touch it with my mouth. That's great. Yes, and we get a treat. If you can get the YES, or the click, at the moment the dog's mouth is touching it, you're more likely to get them opening their mouth. So timing is key. Once you've got the touch, then you wait until you've got the open mouth, and then you wait until they're willing to actually open their mouth wide enough to hold it. And then what you want to do is gently hold it at either end, so that when it's in their mouth, you just kind of release the pressure a little bit so they take the weight. And that's when using something light is a really good idea. Using something heavy could be a negative reinforcer to the dog, so keep it light. Dogs have different reasons for not wanting to put things in their mouth. If your dog is the type of dog that doesn't want to be reinforced with food. It might be that you play with them with the toy that they need to put in their mouth. But most dogs that struggle with a retrieve are not dogs that play with a toy in their mouth anyway, so as far as I'm aware. So we have our treats, and yes, see, now she's fine with it. It's taken us a long time to get here, but what I will say is if your dog does drop it, please. Okay, good girl. Ask them to pick it up again and then pop it in your hand so that they know that it has to come back to your hand. Yeah, good girl. So note, there is no word to ask her to do this, there's just the item. And I also want her to give it to me to hand. That's my personal preference. If you want to let the dog drop it on the floor, that's fine, but I prefer for it to go to hand. I emphasise again the fact that there is no cue word. There is nothing that other than seeing the item to tell her to pick it up. And that's because we will only introduce a cue word once we have scented it. But for the time being, we just practice on holding it. So it's too hot here at the moment. We'll just practice on holding it and giving it to hand. So that's the next possible indication. And then my final video is going to be on the stair, which Jack is going to demonstrate with a tennis ball in the next video.